worked out. You had a good eye.
It is. It's just started kind of using so it looks like.
I've got 4 people on Zoom. Who's staying? Nobody's staying. I'm so sad. You had a whole live room, but they don't want to stay for me, so that's okay. All right, guys on Zoom. Oh, yeah. All right, so I've got a bunch of people on Zoom. Welcome, people on Zoom. I'm just going to start this presentation, and please, I'm going to be having the presentation on the screen for you, and so please speak up. Do not put a message in the chat. Just speak up if you have a question, and I will be happy to answer it. I do have some people live here with me in the Fremont office here. All right, so let's share the screen and let's get right into this for those of you who are here. So, all right, can everybody on Zoom see my screen? Just give me a thumbs up or a heart.
Yes.
Yeah, very good. Okay, thank you, Elena. All right, so this class is all about escrow management. So, hold on. Some music just went on. I don't know why. Okay. That is so weird. So yeah, so this is a class about escrow management. So we're going to talk about what the heck escrow is. We're going to talk about how important it is to be thinking about your transactions, beyond just getting your buyer into contract. Getting your buyer into contract is just the first step. And so the whole point of this class is to talk about what happens after that. We don't get paid until we have actually done the whole transaction. So a buyer writes an offer that gets accepted, we're not done yet. And you don't get paid till the end. So we can't just sort of say after we get the buyer into contract or after the seller has a buyer accept their offer that all of our work is done. No, we're just getting started with our role. So we're going to go through what is escrow, the role of the agent, your role in an escrow, the typical activities of an escrow. We're going to do a bit of a case study, and then a few final thoughts I want to share with you, and I'll leave a little bit of time for questions, and we'll be done before 3, I promise. So, what is escrow? So the way to think about escrow is that it is a legal arrangement. It is a legal arrangement that involves a neutral third party. So we use title companies like Chicago Title, Fidelity Title, Old Republic Title, First American, and other companies that manage the money in the documents during a transaction until specific things have happened, or what we call the conditions have been met. So these companies in Northern California are associated with title companies. So they're the same thing. In Southern California, they're different businesses. But in Northern California, we're lucky. We only have to deal with one person. If you were selling a house in Southern California, you'd have both a title officer and an escrow agent. But in our area, you usually just deal with one person. So the way to think about escrow is it's like a container. It's like a container for the activities of the transaction. And they are responsible for those activities and making sure they happen, such as the movement of money. Your buyers never write a check to the seller directly. They always write a check to the escrow company. The lender puts money with the escrow when they're funding the loan of the buyer. They don't send it directly to the seller. They also move documents. They make sure that all of the county, that the county where the property is properly notified when the deal is done. They make sure that the deed is properly transferred to the new owner. And they also, to an extent, manage activities, making sure that the buyer signs and documents associated with paying off their loan, for example. And so that is more or less what they do. They are not an agent of the seller or the buyer. They are independent. And that's why buyers can trust when they write a check to the escrow company for a transaction, it's sitting in this non-physical container. It's not going to the seller. Now that's important if there's a dispute, like for the initial deposit. The buyer puts in the initial deposit, you don't want that money in the seller's hands until the buyer is executed on the contract. That's what they need to do. So escrow begins when a purchase agreement is ratified. And escrow ends when one of two things happens. Number one, the transfer of title is recorded at the county. Ownership shifts. Or two, the transaction is canceled. And if you've taken our RPA class and we've worked together, you know that deals fall apart sometimes for a lot of reasons, get canceled by either side, and that ends the escrow as well. So I talked about the purchase agreement being ratified. When is ratification? What does that mean in terms for your offers? What is ratification? Oops. Anybody? What does it mean when a contract is ratified? What's happened?
Okay.
Huh? Sorry?
Make it valid.
Make it, who is this?
Nadine.
Oh, Nadine, nice to see you.
Hi.
Well, what does it mean to make it valid? Yes, it's valid, but what does it mean when a ratification, what happens with the
Ratification, it's when the both parties signed and returned.
right? And the final party is notified. The
Yeah.
final party is notified. So it is good that both parties have signed everything, but it isn't a deal until the last party is notified. So let me give you an example. Elena, you write an offer for your buyer. The seller signs the paperwork, but the listing agent representing that seller doesn't send it back to you. Until he sends it back to you, you're not actually ratified, even though his seller signed it. Let's take another example. Chang writes an offer for his buyer. The seller counters the offer. His buyer is thinking about it, tells him that he wants to agree to it. Chang sends him the paperwork. In the meantime, while Chang is sending the paperwork to the buyer, the seller accepts another offer. So even though Chang's client said he was ready to go, until Chang sends back the signed counteroffer, they don't actually have a deal. Does that make sense to everybody? That is the way it works for ratification. All right, what is your job as an agent? What is your job here? You are the project manager. Yay. That means you're more than the quarterback on the team. You're the coach. You're calling the plays, and you are making sure everybody does what they need to do. Okay? You are making sure that your client does what they need to do, that the agent on the other side does what they need to do. If you're representing a buyer, the buyer's lender. If you're representing a buyer or a seller, the escrow company. Home inspectors, transaction coordinators, you're coordinating all of it. Your job is to be a babysitter. Make sure your client is doing everything they have to do when they're supposed to do it, as per what the contract says. For example, commitment to contingencies. You have a buyer investigation contingency, expires on the 10th day. On the 10th day, you're going to help your client to decide what to do about that contingency. You're coordinating with other participants to keep everyone on the same page. You want to have good communications with the listing agent or the agent on the other side. You want to have good communications with the buyer's lender if you're representing the buyer, and with escrow and the agent on the other side. So your job is to get the sale done, right? You have a tremendous motivation to get the sale done because you don't get paid until it gets done. But always remember, you have to be a fiduciary to your client. That means you have to put their interests first. Sometimes that means advising them that they should cancel, which is unpleasant for you because that means you're not going to get paid, despite all the work having been done. It's the nature of the beast. You verify the accuracy and completion of all documents. whether or not you use a transaction coordinator. So we have complicated paperwork for our deals here in California, and there's a lot of paperwork, and most of the agents use a transaction coordinator to make sure everything gets signed and initialed and dated right. However, even though we have great TCs here at KW Advisors who will help you make sure you are getting everything signed and dated appropriately, they are not responsible. The transaction coordinator is not responsible if they forgot to tell you about a form that you need for the transaction. The brokerage publishes lists of the forms you need, and your broker, you can contact your broker, your mentor, or your coach if you're wondering what form you need for something. Your transaction coordinator is not responsible for incorrect forms. Okay? They will make sure it gets initialed and signed for you. And many times they will suggest, if they're good TC, they'll say, have you thought about this form? But it's not their job. Okay? Furthermore, if it is a form that is going to change the term of the contract or fulfill a term of the contract, as opposed to a straight up disclosure, then they're going to make you get the form. So for example, contingency release. Your transaction coordinator typically will not send a contingency release form to your client if you're representing a buyer on the transaction, because that is a contract compliance thing. You want to get that personally. Now, you may say, my buyer has agreed to do this, please send the form. That's okay. But normally they won't do it unless they have explicit permission from you. Okay. So, is everyone clear about our role as agents? We're babysitter, cheerleader, quarterback, and coach. So, selling a home in California is complicated, and there are lots of things that can happen in a transaction that are, unusual things. It is more common to have an unusual thing than it is to have everything go according to some script. However, that being said, there are 15 things that are typical in most escrows. 15 things. The first, and we're going to go through each one of them. The first step is to open escrow. If you are the buyer's agent, the buyer's agent typically does this. We're going to talk more about that. You arrange for the initial deposit. That's a buyer agent thing. Review disclosures. That's buyer and buyer's agent. Verify insurance. Buyer and buyer's agent. Order complete inspections. Buyer and buyer's agent. Confirm and complete the appraisal. Buyer and the buyer's agent. File commission demand. Verify the loan status with the lender. Complete your agent visual inspection disclosure, remove contingencies, do the final walkthrough, buyer signing, and it should have a slash there for seller signing, because sellers sign too. Then recording. That's the part where escrow advises the county that the sale has been done. Getting the keys to the property to the buyer, and then celebration. Okay, that's typical. Stuff happens, but that's typical. So let's dig in. Let's do a case study. Let's imagine a $1 million sale price for a condominium, and you represent the buyer. Oops. The key terms, so you're a buyer agent representing the buyer for a $1 million condo sale. The key terms that we know, it's a 30-day escrow. 10 days for investigation contingency, 14 days for the appraisal contingency, 17 days for the loan contingency, and we have disclosure package, which includes the TDS, SPQ, and the listing agent AVID. TDS, for those of you who don't remember, is transfer disclosure statement. SPQ is seller property questionnaire, and listing agent AVID is listing agent visual inspection disclosure. So first step, open escrow as soon as possible. Now your job is to connect with the escrow officer, even if the seller had a pre-escrow open. Okay, there might be a pre-escrow open. It may be told you when you go to write the offer, there's a pre-escrow. As soon as the contract is ratified, you're going to connect with the escrow officer if there's been one assigned because it's a pre-escrow. But if nothing's been set up by the seller, you want to contact that escrow officer as soon as possible that you're working with. And then you're going to send them the fully signed RPA. RPA is residential purchase agreement, the contract, basically. You're also going to send them contact information as soon as possible for your buyer, your buyer's lender, and for your transaction coordinator. Also, the same time frame, right after you get the deal ratified or the next morning, you're going to send the paperwork to your client. And of course, you're going to connect your client with the transaction coordinator so that documents can be signed and initialed. Another thing you need to do is arrange for the initial deposit within 24 hours of contract ratification. That doesn't mean delivery within 24 hours. Delivery could be up to 3 days. The contract default is 3 days, but you want to start making arrangements for it ASAP as soon as you get into contract. Your job is to advise your buyer how much they need to put into escrow, how long they have to do it, and to give them the contact information so that they can make arrangements, because the default in the contract is a wire transfer. Well, they need to know how to do the wire transfer. Or maybe the contract got changed and they're going to do a personal check instead of a wire transfer. So it all needs to be arranged, delivery options, all that stuff. Yes.
The initial deposit, are we talking about that 3%?
Yes.
3%?
3% is what the contract standard is. If you put in less, it makes your offer substantially weaker in the eyes of the seller, and more is unnecessary.
And if buyer defaults for some reason, that deposit is gone, right?
If they default, but in my class on contingencies, you have to remember that not all buyer cancellations are defaults. A default is if the buyer fails to perform as per what the contract says, but buyers have a right of cancellation built into the contract. So if they have contingencies, they have a right of cancellation. So if they can't get their loan, for example, and they cancel, the deposit has to be returned. Okay, the next thing you're going to do within 3 days of getting into contract is tell escrow the terms of the deal. What is your commission? What is the seller's, the other side's commission, if you know it? Who's paying for escrow fees? Who's paying for title insurance? Who's paying for city transfer taxes, county transfer taxes, all those types of things. You can get that, warranty, home warranty is a big one. That is all in the contract. When you review the purchase agreement, it's all been defined there. You would have already talked to your client about it before you even wrote the offer, but escrow needs to know. Escrow needs to know. All right. All right, let's go to the next one. So you send the escrow what they need to know. The next thing you need to do is review the disclosures. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, didn't we get the disclosures before we wrote the offer? And as I said, we did have disclosures. The disclosure package in our case study include a TDS, SPQ, and AVID. But you want to make sure that there's nothing missing from the disclosure package. This particular package is missing a whole bunch of things. Can anyone think of anything that was missing in this list at the bottom of this page? We had a TDS and SPQ, a listing agent, AVID. What are we missing that it would be required by the contract? Any guesses? Well, it is a condo sale. No HOA docs. We're also missing the preliminary title report. You can't do that. That's in the contract. You have to have a title report. You're also missing the natural hazard disclosure, the NHD report. So that is not your transaction coordinator's job to make sure the package is complete. It's yours. So sometimes you are going to be representing buyers on properties where there's zero disclosures. You go into contract with a full investigation contingency, so you have time to review all the documents. So that's part of your process. Verify the package is complete. If the package is not complete, you have to arrange for the seller to deliver them through their agent. Hey, Mr. Listing Agent, when am I getting the HOA docs? You're going to prepare a list of information you learn from reviewing the disclosures, and you're going to review the disclosures with your client, especially if you have an investigation contingency and you haven't done it already before you wrote the offer. Keep in mind that you are not to steer your buyer towards what's important and not important in the disclosure package. We're going to have a class on disclosure packages in a few weeks, maybe even next week. It's coming up. But remember that you want your client to review the disclosure packages first, tell you what their questions are, then, and only then, you bring your concerns and issues and things you saw to the table. Your review of the disclosures is no excuse for your buyer not to look at them. Many buyers are relying on our expert advice, but they're still the ones paying the big money for the house, not us. So they need to review the disclosures. The bigger question here is your buyers have things that are important to them that may be different than the things that are important to you. Another thing I would say about disclosures is avoid relying on artificial intelligence tools like ChatGPT to look at them. They are notoriously inaccurate, especially with old, hard, illegible, unreadable documents or documents that are hard to read or that have a lot of handwriting stuff on it or a lot of charts. They're not that good for that. So they may be in 6 months, but right now they're not. So encourage your client to actually look at the documents, okay, as you will do. Okay, another thing, very big, verify insurability. As soon as you have the deal in contract, you want to connect with your buyer and the lender and make sure your buyer is speaking with their insurance company and make sure the lender is getting that, what they call bound insurance policy. They call it binding. When an insurance company says they will do an insurance policy on a house, they send that document to the lender saying, yes, we are going to insure this house. That's called binding, okay? And so we need to get on this right away, guys. But it used to be you could leave insurance until 2 days before the closing. It was an afterthought. Not anymore. Now you need to do it within right away. You got to get on it because properties have issues and they make it hard to get insurance. So like, for example, knob and tube wiring. Most insurance companies won't write a policy for knob and tube if a home has old electrical. So it's not your job to know all about that. It's your job to make sure your client investigates insurance. You know, what I typically have my clients do is I say, talk to your own insurance that does your car insurance or rental insurance now. And also talk to Stephen Klein from Greystone, who is our mortgage broker that we work with at this company, whom you guys, some of you met him this morning. All right, now, if you have an investigation contingency, whether or not the seller has provided home and pest inspections or other inspection reports, you may be ordering those, typically within 1 or 2 days of getting into contract. Sometimes you order them before the contract's even ratified. If you feel confident it's going to get into contract, you might contact your inspector because you don't want to miss his availability. Sometimes they're very tight on their availability. So order it as soon as possible. Let's suppose you're ordering a home inspection, but get it done as soon as possible as well. You may have this, in our example, we have a 10 days for investigation contingency. So if you call your inspector on day 1, that still gives you a lot of time for them to get on their calendar, for them to come out and deliver the report before day 10. Because day 10 is when your buyer has to make their go, no-go decision on condition. You're going to be scheduling all the site inspections with the listing agent. You're going to be attending all of them, as well as encouraging your buyer to. You're going to make arrangements for your client to make payments. You're going to be very helpful to them in that regard. You're going to arrange for the reports to be delivered in a timely manner. Some of the inspectors out there take a week to do their reports. Some do them next day all the time. There's a variation. You want to find out when you're going to get the report. You want to review the report yourself, as well as encourage your client to read it over. And I actually recommend you set aside time. Mr. Buyer, let's meet from 6 to 7 this evening to review the reports and go through it with them line by line. Another thing you're going to do is order the home warranty, if applicable. So in many cases, the seller, there's a line in the contract, who pays for the home warranty. You might remember the home warranty is like the protection policy. You know, it's not insurance. It's more like a Geek Squad thing if you buy a big screen TV. Appliances, hot water heater, furnace, fridge, range, microwave oven, washer, dryer, and dishwasher. Those are the big ones, right? These policies provide a protection plan. And in the contract, one party is going to, there's 3 choices. Don't have it part of the contract, waive it. Number 2, buyer pays for it. Number 3, seller pays for it. So you want to make sure you know what the contract says. And because escrow will be looking for that information to complete the file. But you also want to review, if your buyer or the seller is paying for it, you want to review the options with them. These policies have 3 or 4 different options. You want to sort of, in many cases, go over it with your buyer and make sure they know what they're going to buy, right? You also want to make sure that the home warranty company bills escrow appropriately for the amount of money, and that if there is a limit on how much the seller, sometimes when you ask the seller to pay for it, so you, as I said, you can, when you're writing an offer, you can either ask the seller to pay for it, or the buyer can pay for it. Agents can pay for it too. But let's just assume the seller's agreed to pay for it. If you're writing it in the contract that way, you're going to say how much the maximum should be. That's why you need to make sure the home warranty company isn't putting in too much money, isn't charging too much money. So let's suppose you wrote in the offer a maximum of $700, but the home warranty company bills $720. Who pays the $20? In my experience, usually I pay that for my clients, $20. I don't want to go to my client and say, sorry, the seller's only paying $700. You're going to have an extra $20 come out of your deal. I don't like to get into matters that small with my clients. You know, we're talking about such a big amount of money to buy a home. Now it's up to you guys. Technically, you don't have to pay anything, but this is why you might want to check with the home warranty company of what they're going to charge before you write the offer. So you cover off it being high. So you don't run into the problem at all. If you're going to ask the seller to pay for it. I always recommend my buyers ask the seller to pay for it. Many sellers do. And when they agree to pay for it, it's like a 1 year something they didn't have to worry about. And it's like the other thing that happens is it's like 1 in 4, maybe 1 in 3 where they push back. So it's an easy get in a contract negotiation. So I recommend that if you're representing a buyer, you always ask. Worst thing they can do is say no. Then the buyer could get it for themselves or not get one at all. So that last bullet point, determine and advise escrow on any excess amount owed. Okay. Yes.
I have a question about the pest report and home inspection. Like if seller already providing us inspection reports and pest control, everything, do we still encourage buyers to get their own as well?
The question is, if we have a disclosure package that already has a home and or a pest inspection report, do we still encourage our buyers to get one themselves? The answer is yes, always. Especially if you've never done business with the company that the seller hired, or if you look at their report and it looks flimsy or thin to you. But we always recommend buyers get their own reports. Then they can be present and we'll walk through with the inspector, and you can make sure they use a reputable inspector that you help them to choose. So almost always, you know, if there's no investigation contingency, your buyers may choose not to do it. But if there is one, I always encourage my buyers to get their own.
This goes with brand new construction as well.
With new construction, it's a little trickier because they don't really like it when you bring in third-party inspectors who are going to do a report on new construction, and they do have their blue tape walkthrough at the end of the new construction deal. Plus, you as an agent are acting as a referral agent in that scenario. You're not actually representing your buyer. You've referred him out. So it's it's a different thing in new construction. Yes.
Just want to add that it is important because we actually purchased brand new home construction. It was from the builder, and we did run into some issues, structural issues. So I think having an inspection done is important even for that. So we live in a condo, and there were so many issues now that we are, living for 3 years.
Yeah.
Have come across some.
Did
major
you,
structural issues.
did they sales office give you guys a hard time for bringing in your own inspector during your escrow?
We didn't even.
No, you didn't
be
know to do it.
honest. It's like first time home buyers.
Yeah.
And, it's a brand new,
Yeah.
but
I would always try to bring in your own inspector on new construction because they'll find all kinds of stuff. Because the blue tape walkthrough where they put a little bit of blue tape when they see a nick in the wall or whatever doesn't cover systems. And certain things can happen that your home inspector, a good one, will say, hey, this could be a problem. Yeah. All right. So the next thing you need to do is confirm and complete the appraisal. If your buyer has financing, you need to make sure the appraisal is going to be ordered by the lender and is scheduled as soon as possible. I'd like you to make sure it's ordered within a couple of days. If you have, in our example, we had what, 14 days? Let's go back. We had 14 days for the appraisal contingency. So by day 2, we want it ordered. Sometimes these appraisers get very busy and they can't come out right away. Sometimes there's a timing issue for what they're available for when the seller can let them in. So you're going to coordinate with the lender to make sure it's ordered quickly in the time frame of your deal. You're going to coordinate with the listing agent to make sure the appraiser can get on site. You're going to prepare comps of other properties to show the appraiser to justify the price your buyer is paying. If you can attend the appraisal, you should meet the appraiser, share with him the comps, and have a conversation about things about the house that make it that he might not otherwise know, or about other properties in the neighborhood your buyer saw, right? And then talk to your client about potential outcomes and strategies for potential outcomes. For example, you should be talking with your buyer before the appraisal about what happens if the appraisal comes in low. And I have a whole class on my coaching YouTube channel about that question and how to talk about low appraisals with your client. All right. At least 5, sorry, question.
Can that be done even before we have a buyer?
Yeah, before you have a buyer.
Save some listing agent.
A listing agent could order an appraisal, but it doesn't make any sense. They are putting the property on the market at the price they want to get for it. And if they get a cash buyer, the cash buyer may not need an appraisal anyway. No, it's for a buyer. But what you might do is order the appraisal. You're going to order the appraisal as soon as you get into contract. You don't normally order it before you get into contract because if the buyer doesn't get the property, they've wasted money. And since the lender usually orders it, the lender won't order it until you get into contract anyway. Yeah. And sometimes they don't need to send out an appraiser. Sometimes they give an appraisal waiver. They say, we have enough information about this property. We don't need an appraisal. That's becoming more common. All right. File a commission demand. File a commission demand. So how am I talking about here? Is we want you guys to get paid on time. If you don't put your commission demand into KW Command, or you won't get paid on time. It gets reviewed, especially if you're a new agent in the coaching program. It gets reviewed by me. And it certainly gets reviewed by the broker, and you should read it over to make sure you're getting paid appropriately. And you should know about this at least a week before closing so that you're not leaving things at the last minute. Because if there's a problem, documents need to be done, refiled, and stuff needs to be done. You might need an amendment. There's all kinds of weird things that can happen. So best to make sure the demand looks right and you have all your questions answered about how you're going to get paid long before you get paid so that the check gets cut right. Now, if you have a loan for your buyer, there's 2 things you need to do with regard to the buyer's loan. At least 3 days before the removal of the loan contingency, you want to have a conversation with the buyer's lender about where things are at with the loan. Has the loan, do you have all the documents you need? Has the loan been processed properly? Is it in the underwriting stage? Where are we at with underwriting? Do we have clear to close? Are any conditions still outstanding? You do it a second time, at least a day before the loan funds. So two things are happening, right? You're going to remove the contingency. The lender is making a commitment to do the loan. And then 24 hours before they put the money in, they usually put the money in the day of closing or the day before closing. And you want to check with the lender again the day before that to make sure that everything is still good, because stuff happens, I promise you. Financing can get complicated. You must complete your agent visual inspection disclosure as soon as possible before the investigation contingency is over, which in this example was 10 days. You want that, and you want your buyer to look at it before they lift their contingency, so they had everything in front of them on their deadline. It would be embarrassing and very potentially problematic if you did the AVID 2 days after they lifted all their contingencies and they read something in your AVID that made them not want to buy the property anymore. That's a problem. So you want to get the AVID done no later than the removal of contingency deadline. Okay, so what do you need to do? You need to coordinate a site visit for you to go do the visual inspection. You need to send it, you have to finish it and send it to the buyer for their review and have a discussion and get signatures on it. Once it is signed by your buyer and you can send it to the listing agent. You can instruct your transaction coordinator to do this part for you, or you can do it yourself. We have on the agent portal, oh, okay, I just told you the answer. Where can you find tips on how to complete an AVID? On the agent portal under this heading, Productivity Coaching Resources Toolkit. So I have a cheat sheet there, things to think about when you're completing an agent visual inspection disclosure. For the two people in the room, did either of you go with Pat to do her AVID 2 weeks ago when she took all the agents out to do the walkthrough of the property? No, okay. She did that a couple weeks ago. There were a whole bunch of agents from coaching in it. She actually in real time did it with them. It's great. All right. Another thing you get to do as part of your due diligence managing this transaction is remove contingencies by the contractual deadlines. So you want to discuss with your client all the options for each contingency no later than the due date for the removal of the contingency. For each contingency you're going to remove, you're going to use a CR form. CR stands for contingency removal. That's a form you use that your buyer signs it and sent to the listing agent once it's signed. If you are signing it subject to conditions, you call the listing agent to explain why there are conditions or exceptions or things. This is a very important step, and you want to have this happen the day that the evening that the day the contingencies are removed. All right. One of the last things you do is a final walkthrough. This is done 3 to 5 days before you get the keys, before your buyer gets the keys, rather. You're going to want to schedule this date with the listing agent, discuss the purpose of the inspection and its limitations. Because the final walkthrough inspection is not, has limitations on it. You want to complete the form. There's a form for this inspection called the VP. VP stands for Verification of Property Condition. And then once it's signed by your client, you want to send it to the listing agent. And then if necessary, call the listing agent to discuss what's on the form. So what are some limitations of the final walkthrough? What makes it different than a normal inspection? Any guesses?
There'll be no changes with the offer, or the seller would be negotiating?
Yes, you're right. the final walkthrough does not create an obligation, does not change the buyer's commitment to closing. So the way to think about this is, it is not a contingency. The buyer can't do the final walkthrough, see a broken window or water all over the kitchen floor and say, I don't want to buy the house anymore. That would be a breach of contract. There are 3 things in the final walkthrough, just 3 things. Number 1, you check to make sure the property's in the same condition as it was before when the offer was accepted. And if it isn't, the seller has to make it right. Number 2, all of the seller's stuff is gone. All the personal property is removed unless there's a rent back. Okay, but that's the second thing. They have to remove all their stuff and it has to be gone by the closing. And then number 3, if the seller committed to do any repairs, maybe earlier in the deal, there was a negotiation that the seller would repair the furnace and have a functioning furnace. This walkthrough gives your buyer a chance to check that it was done and done properly. That's it. No cancellation rights are created by any problem identified in the final walkthrough. Okay. Within 2 to 3 days of closing, your buyer will be signing their documents. These are all the loan documents, the deed transfer documents, stuff for the property taxes, and all that stuff is managed by Escrow. They take care of it, but your buyer is going to be either going to the escrow office or having a mobile notary come to their home or work or wherever they meet them, even your office sometimes. Before this happens, your buyer will get a final term sheet, so they'll know what their money is. There will be any errors that were in that term sheet hopefully resolved. You're going to be verifying that the escrow officer has the scheduling all signed and that it's happening. And if you can attend in person, especially for a first-time home buyer, that's always really nice. Really nice for you to be there. Recording, we're near the end now. The deal is actually only done when it records at the county. When escrow sends you that email saying we are on record, now that means a deal is done and you're going to get paid. Until that point, no matter how far along you were, it isn't a done deal. So you want to talk to your client and advise them it's going to happen or when it's going to happen. And you have to tell your client that they cannot move in. They can't move in before this happens. And they can't move any of their stuff into the front yard or into the garage or anywhere until this happens. No, there's big insurance risks there. And this is happy news. So you want to phone them as soon as you learn about it and congratulate them because now they're the owner of a house, or your seller, congratulate them for having completed the sale. Your last formal duty here is to your last formal thing you got to do here is to get your buyer the keys. As soon you want to make the arrangement, you want to get earlier there. You want to get there before your client there if the keys are in a lockbox, to take the keys out of the lockbox. And you want to present the keys to your buyer, make a big fuss about it in a formal way, in a fun way. Maybe do some selfies, get this on your Instagram feed or whatever. Once this is done and you've left, you can advise the listing agent that lockbox is empty and they can now arrange for the removal of the lockbox and the yard sign. Sometimes there's no lockbox there or you have to get the keys from somewhere else. Sometimes there's no yard sign, but this is typical. And don't forget to celebrate. Don't forget to celebrate. My recommendation is that you send or deliver a closing gift to your buyers and to anyone else you feel is appropriate. Some buyers agents send closing gifts to everyone involved. You could leave a gift in the house for them to discover, like a bottle of sparkling wine in the fridge, maybe, with a bow around it and a nice card. I recommend you send thank you note cards or emails to all the key players to help the deal to succeed. And you also want to arrange for follow-up check-ins. You don't just stop talking to your client as soon as it closes. Stay in touch at least a couple of times in the next week and maybe you want to put it on a calendar. You're going to call them at the 1 month mark, 3 month mark, 1 year anniversary. Set up a plan. So that is more or less the case study. A couple of points I want to make as we close out here. First of all, these transactions can get a little nerve-wracking at times. I am having one like that right now. You want to breathe, slow down, think about it, and talk to your mentors or your coaches or your advisors. Everyone in the office will be very supportive if you come to them with a question. And so they can just sort of help you navigate it. Don't be in a rush to respond to that angry text or that alarming email. Give yourself a few minutes to just sort of compose yourself. Real estate transactions are complicated and stuff happens no matter how well organized you are. Stuff is going to happen. Remember that this is incredibly intense emotionally for the principals, the buyer and the seller. Your job is to stay cool and collected because you're the professional. So you are the one who doesn't get emotionally invested in it. And remember, you always want to be a fiduciary for your client and do what's in their best interests. All right. Does anyone have any questions on Zoom? No?
I have
Okay.
a question.
Yeah, please.
Most deals, offers within the area, does it have inspection contingencies? Because what I came to know is very rare there are contingency because of the demand here. Is it right?
It depends on the market. You should
Okay.
always, as a buyer's agent, stress your buyer the importance of keeping their contingencies. The market has softened a lot, and we are seeing more and more and more sales having contingencies in the deals. Every market is different, though, and there are certainly parts of Fremont and other communities where there's still multiple offers on every property. But remember that if you're representing a buyer, you don't want to be the one that tells them they don't have to have contingencies. You want to be the one that begrudgingly allows them to write without one. And there's a CAR form, there's a zip form, all for that purpose called the non-contingent offer advisory. So if you're going to write non-contingent, you absolutely want your buyer to sign that and include it with the offer. And the reason is this: 3 months after they buy the house non-contingent, they find a problem and they're going to blame you. So if you've told them all about the risks of writing non-contingent and not doing their own investigations, they are less likely to blame you when something goes wrong after they buy without any contingencies and not having done any of the research themselves. So yeah, sometimes your buyers, to be competitive, will be pressured to lift all their contingencies. If you do that, just be careful you advise them that it's, not really what you want to do. It's always a balancing act between what's going to win versus what is going to give them the best best way of reducing risk.
So if you're a seller agent, I'm the buyer agent. You get two offers. One is inspection with inspection contingency, and one without inspection contingency. So what would you prefer?
Are you the buyer's agent or the seller's
Yes.
agent? You said both.
I'm the buyer's agent. You are the seller's agent.
Oh, I'm the listing agent.
Sorry, you are the.
I would never deny the offer on that alone, Prathap. It would depend what the price and terms were.
Okay.
If they were identical, except for the contingency, I would be wondering about the quality of the offer presentation and whether or not there's any risk for my seller in accepting a non-contingent offer. The lawyers tell us we should as listing agents, we should counter non-contingent offers to put in a 2 or 3 day contingency to protect our sellers, because a buyer would have a hard time going after a seller for some defect if they had been countered to have a contingency that they didn't exploit. So it's a tricky question. Now, that's me, Prathap. There are absolutely listing agents who take a blanket approach to contingencies, who would automatically be inclined to take the offer that didn't have it. But if there's just 2 offers or 3 offers, it would be a risk I would take for my buyer every day, put in a contingency. I don't, especially if my pricing is very, very attractive, or I have a high down payment or some other term. Maybe the seller needs a fast close that the other people can't provide or may not provide, or, you're a cash buyer. I mean, there's all kinds of variables to think about. It isn't simple, just that one thing. That's a great question, though.
Okay. Last, sorry on that. So almost all offers, unless it is a cash offer, would have a loan contingency, right?
No, there are many buyers in competitive markets who get their financing pre-underwritten, and they have such a
Oh,
good relationship and such a good financial picture that they write their offer without a loan contingency, even though they're getting a loan. And what they're
oh,
basically saying to the seller is, Mr. Seller, I'm going to buy your house even, I'm not going to make it a contingency of the deal that I get this loan. I'm so confident I'm going to get it. I'm not going to have a loan contingency.
okay.
That happens too. All right. So on this next page is my QR code. And this QR code, if you click on it, you will get a copy of this presentation. And there's a couple of questions I ask about the presentation. But after you fill out the Google form that comes with this, I send you a copy of the presentation. And so, I encourage you to, if you want a copy of this presentation, that's what you should do. And this class is being recorded for the YouTube, so it'll be on my YouTube channel almost immediately, so you can watch it again in the future. I want to thank everyone for coming out to this and being here for this, and I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you.
Okay.